Before we begin tonight, I need you to do something unusual for me. If you're watching this alone, stop for a second and listen carefully to the sounds around you. The fan turning slowly above your head, the dogs barking somewhere far outside, maybe even the faint sound of traffic in the distance. Because somewhere in the Philippines tonight, there are mountains where people still swear they hear sounds from a war that officially ended more than 80 years ago. Footsteps beneath the earth, metallic banging deep underground, distant voices speaking Japanese from empty forests after midnight. And the strangest part is this. Many of these places are tied to stories about hidden treasure buried during World War II. But according to local rumors, the treasure was never left alone underground. Something else was buried with it. Something that was never supposed to come back out. Tonight, we're diving into one of the darkest legends connected to Philippine wartime history. The terrifying stories surrounding Yamashita's gold. But this is not a story about adventure. It's not a story about treasure maps or fortune hunters becoming rich overnight. This is a story about desperation, mass death, betrayal, sealed tunnels, and the terrifying possibility that some places absorb human suffering so deeply, they never let it go. By 1944, the Pacific War was collapsing around the Japanese Empire. American forces were returning to the Philippines. Battles were spreading across the islands, and Japanese military leaders allegedly faced a massive problem. Throughout occupied territories in Southeast Asia, enormous amounts of gold, jewelry, religious artifacts, artwork, cash, and valuables had reportedly been seized from banks, temples, wealthy families, and governments. According to wartime rumors that later evolved into legend, these treasures were transported across the region before eventually being hidden somewhere inside the Philippines. The name most people associate with the story is General Tomoyuki Yamashita, known as the Tiger of Malaya. Whether Yamashita himself truly controlled these hidden treasures remains heavily debated by historians. But in Philippine folklore, his name became permanently attached to one terrifying idea. Somewhere beneath the islands, hidden war loot still waits underground. And according to the stories whispered across provinces for generations, the Japanese military did not simply bury gold. They buried secrets worth killing thousands to protect. Old rumors describe elaborate tunnel systems carved into mountains, jungles, caves, abandoned mines, and remote hillsides across the country. Some stories claim entire underground chambers were reinforced with concrete and steel. Others describe hidden railway systems beneath the earth used to transport crates through secret passages. In Benguet, Nueva Ecija, Laguna, Bataan, and parts of Mindanao, stories about wartime tunnels became deeply woven into local memory after the war ended. Elderly residents told younger generations about strange military operations in remote areas shortly before Japanese forces surrendered. Trucks arriving at night, forced laborers disappearing into mountains, dynamite explosions echoing through the hills for days. Some witnesses allegedly described prisoners carrying crates into tunnels they never came back out from. And this is where the story becomes horrifying. According to some of the darkest accounts tied to Yamashita treasure legends, prisoners of war and forced laborers were allegedly used to construct many of these underground chambers. Filipino civilians, captured soldiers, Chinese laborers, people taken from villages and forced to dig under brutal wartime conditions. They allegedly carved tunnels by hand while starving, exhausted, and constantly threatened by execution. But once the treasure was finally hidden inside, secrecy supposedly became more important than human life. Stories began spreading that entire tunnel crews were sealed alive underground after construction finished. Entrances collapsed intentionally with explosives. Concrete poured shut while workers were still trapped inside. Some accounts even claimed machine guns were used to eliminate surviving laborers before tunnels were permanently sealed. No witnesses. No survivors. No loose ends. Whether every detail is true no longer matters to many Filipinos, because over the decades, these stories stopped feeling like history and started becoming folklore. Entire regions began associating certain mountains and caves with death, curses, and restless spirits. Treasure hunters entered these places searching for gold and returned talking about things that sounded far worse. In the years after World War II, stories of hidden treasure spread rapidly across the Philippines. Some people became obsessed. Farmers abandoned land to search for rumored tunnel entrances. Amateur treasure hunters studied wartime maps for decades. Foreign investors quietly funded excavations deep in remote provinces. Entire teams disappeared into mountains for weeks, carrying digging equipment, generators, explosives, and metal detectors. The dream was always the same: uncover hidden wartime gold and become rich beyond imagination. But many treasure hunters eventually discovered that the deeper they went into these stories, the stranger things became. There are reports from diggers who claimed they heard metallic knocking sounds underground, despite nobody else being near the excavation. Others described hearing Japanese voices echoing through tunnels long abandoned since the 1940s. Some reported sudden cold air rushing through sealed chambers where no wind should exist. One story from northern Luzon described a treasure hunting group that allegedly broke through a hidden concrete wall inside a mountain tunnel, only to discover human skeletons stacked beside rusted military crates. According to the story, several members of the group immediately abandoned the site after hearing what sounded like distant screaming deeper inside the darkness. Another rumor tells of workers becoming violently sick after opening sealed underground chambers, untouched since the war. Some developed paranoia. Others reportedly refused to ever discuss what they saw again. And then there are the disappearances. Throughout the decades, rumors continued spreading about treasure hunters vanishing in remote excavation sites. Equipment left behind, camps abandoned overnight. Freshly dug tunnels mysteriously collapsed before authorities arrived. In some provinces, locals began refusing to guide outsiders into certain mountains entirely. Older residents sometimes warned younger people never to join treasure expeditions, no matter how much money was offered. Because according to local superstition, places soaked in mass death eventually become spiritually poisoned. In Filipino folklore, violent death rarely ends quietly. Spirits tied to betrayal, murder, or unfinished suffering are believed to linger. And if hundreds, maybe thousands, truly died protecting hidden war treasure beneath Philippine soil, then what exactly remained trapped underground all these years? Some treasure hunters began describing encounters that sounded less like history and more like horror. Shadowy figures standing near tunnel entrances before disappearing into trees. Sounds of marching boots late at night, despite nobody nearby. Japanese military commands shouted somewhere deep underground. One man allegedly claimed his group discovered an old tunnel sealed behind stone and concrete in a remote mountain area. When they finally forced their way inside, they found military crates untouched by time, but also rows of skeletons sitting against tunnel walls as though they had died waiting for rescue. According to the story, one member of the team swore he saw movement farther inside the chamber, despite nobody else being alive down there. They left everything behind and never returned. Even more disturbing are the stories involving old wartime symbols. Across the Philippines, treasure hunters became obsessed with strange markings allegedly left behind by Japanese soldiers. Symbols carved into rocks, hidden directional signs, underground maps. Some believed these markings pointed toward hidden gold locations. Others warned the symbols were traps designed to mislead or kill intruders. Entire underground communities formed around decoding supposed wartime clues. And with every new rumor came more disappearances, more failed expeditions, and more stories of people encountering things they could never explain. But maybe the most unsettling part of all this is how deeply these stories still affect real communities today. There are places in the Philippines where older locals still refuse to discuss wartime tunnels after dark. Some provinces continue passing down stories of cursed caves connected to Japanese occupation atrocities. In remote barangays, children are warned never to enter abandoned mountain tunnels, no matter what they hear inside. Some believe the spirits of executed workers guard hidden treasure from the living. Others think the dead simply cannot rest because their bodies were never properly buried. And in many of these stories, greed always leads people back underground again. Another expedition, another rumor, another attempt to uncover gold hidden beneath the islands. But according to local folklore, the mountains do not give up their secrets freely. And maybe that's what makes the Yamashita Gold legend so terrifying. Not the possibility that treasure exists, but the possibility that the Philippines still carries invisible scars from wartime suffering buried beneath the earth itself. Beneath forests, beneath rice fields, beneath mountains tourists drive past every year without realizing what stories the locals refuse to tell them. Because even now, somewhere across the country tonight, there may still be sealed tunnels no human being has opened since World War II ended. Chambers filled with rusted weapons, forgotten bones, and silence older than most people alive today. And if those stories are even partially true, then somewhere underground, people may still be waiting in darkness exactly where they were left behind. So the next time you hear someone joke about hidden war treasure in the Philippines, remember this. Legends like these survive for generations because they are attached to real fear, real violence, and real human suffering. And sometimes, the scariest part of history is not what we remember. It's what was buried so deeply that nobody was ever supposed to find it again. If this story unsettled you tonight, subscribe, because Philippine history hides far darker stories than most people realize. And the deeper we dig into forgotten places across these islands, the more it feels like something beneath them is still trying to be heard.